Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Wasteland Talks, my weekly talk show where I talk about whatever the hell I want. And this time, we're coming back with a new episode of All Time Greats as we tackle another great director, Milos Forman. And joining me this time, we have Luke from SitPop. Luke, thank you so much for coming back onto the channel.
Hello, nice being back.
And what we're going to be focusing on is giving you some reasons why we believe Foreman is one of the all-time great directors. And I'm going to let Luke kick things off by talking a little bit about where Foreman came from.
Thank you. So, Foreman, as many might know, he's originally from Czech Republic or back then Czechoslovakia. So he started directing quite early on, in the middle of 60s, and he has directed a couple of movies back in Czechoslovakia, such as Fireman Ball. For example, that movie gets parodied quite a lot of times, even in Simpsons, and not many people realize that. As there's a scene in the Fireman's Ball where they have this tombola going around, and suddenly lights go out, and quite a few items disappear once the lights come back on. So the man in charge of the tombola is like, "Okay, let's what we'll do is we will switch off the lights, and those who stole the items, they have the opportunity to to return them." So obviously they do it, and of course the point of that scene is everything else gets stolen and there's this old guy just stealing this big ham, and he just gets caught, so he panics and runs away. And that scene has been parodied even in Simpsons, but
Mm.
people don't realize that's from that movie. But yeah, his story is interesting because he was fighting against, in Czechoslovakia back then, it was a really strict communist regime. So he would put in his movies quite a few anti-communist things. So obviously he was not popular by the regime, which led him to pretty much having to go to America and start what would become his really influential and a really awarded career as a filmmaker.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting hearing like the story of a director and where they come from. And obviously, he had to go through a lot of adversity
Hmm.
and get here. And then we're all very happy that he did. And
Yes.
he, like, looking at his filmography, he doesn't have a ton of films in
Yeah.
terms of, especially compared to people like, Spielberg and Scorsese, who have made like dozens and dozens and dozens of films. But like, that winning percentage of some big time, very influential films, they're there. And, you know, being somebody who makes such great films and then also being somebody who stands up in a way to that kind of tyranny was like, that's worth lauding. So good for
Hmm.
you, Mr. Foreman. And then now we get to enjoy all your films. Now, what was your next point, Luke?
Well, my next point was he still to this day is only one of the three directors behind, not behind, but alongside with Clint Eastwood and Francis Ford Coppola, who has managed to win Best Director Oscar twice. Which, yeah, it is quite rare as well. Yeah, only Clint Eastwood and Francis, have managed to do that. And it was for obviously Amadeus and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So to me, if you think about, like, not even Steven Spielberg's managed to win twice, which obviously is wrong, but it is what it is. And even the likes of Hitchcock, never won. Like, so to me, that just seems just the idea of what he had to overcome to get there. Obviously the language barrier, the communism, all that stuff, and then he, what he's managed to do, yeah, and do it twice, and for such a vastly different yet kind of similar movies. If you watch a documentary made about him with him when he was still alive, as unfortunately he passed away. Was it 2 years ago now? It was about that time. Uh,
Oh my,
yeah.
it's 5 years ago at this point.
Is it
He
5?
he passed away in 2018. But COVID kind of made a time warp, so
Yes,
everything
time.
gets a little condensed.
No, yeah, time, yeah, no longer makes sense to me. But yeah, it's insane. Yeah, but as you said, he was not as prolific as Spielberg or as any other, even modern directors by any means. Yeah, he's only directed a handful of movies, but the quality remained quite high throughout his career. Even though, of course, it's hard to top One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or Amadeus.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of like that recognition from like awards and the Academy Awards, it's like very few directors were able to get that kind of recognition with multiple Best Director Oscars. And it's definitely popped up a lot more recently because, you had that string where within 5 years, 6 years, Alfonso Cuarón and Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu won two each.
Mm,
And before that, it's like it's not a common occurrence. And being able to go out there and get that kind of recognition, like to your point, it's like there's amazing directors, legendary directors who haven't won a single one.
yes.
And it's pretty obvious that he deserved them for both of those films because they're such impactful and influential and impressive films, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Mhm.
But I know you had one other point about some of his films in terms of that recognition as well.
Well, the I would say the main point is for the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which he is that is only the one of three movies in the entire Oscars history that managed to win the Big Five. For those who don't know, the Big Five means that one single movie managed to win Best Picture, Best Director, Leading Actor and Actress, and Best Script. Only three movies in Oscar history, so almost 100 years now, have managed to do that. So, and it's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and that's the movie from 1931. I'm just blanking on. And there's a Silence of the
And
Lambs,
yeah.
and
But
there's a one I've seen it, and I'm blanking on the title. But
but
yeah, it's yep.
yeah, even to your point, it's like that's what, three movies in 60 years.
Well, almost 100 because we just had 94, 95. Like it's close to 100 now. It's
Yeah.
really soon we're gonna have the 100th Oscars.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it is insane. And not only that, when he managed to, or when his movie managed to do it, it wasn't, up against none other than Jaws and Steven Spielberg, because
Mhm.
Jaws was nominated for most of these awards. I don't believe they were. I don't believe Jaws were nominated in the Best Leading Actress, but everything else, and so he managed to beat Spielberg, where Spielberg, started to become Spielberg, which kind of blows my mind.
That it's an impressive competition, and that kind of ability to make such a balanced film where you're obviously best picture supposed to be like that recognition of, hey, this isn't a completely well-rounded put together film because it is the best film.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to bring a script to life, because like he didn't write One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but like as a director, you're taking this script and bringing it to life on screen and getting the best performances out of your actors. And, you know, Liz Fletcher was someone's like, she's going to be remembered most because of that film. Now, it would be very interesting to learn a bit of the direction that he did with Jack Nicholson, which I imagine Jack Nicholson kind of did a lot of stuff on his own. But the thing is, it's like being able to bring all that balance because, like, that character could easily have become a caricature
Mm-hmm.
and over the top, and being able to like keep that focus and bring an incredible ensemble cast together too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's something special, and being able to make such a balanced film is impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my two biggest points of he might not have a whole large filmography, but like I think he's obviously going to be remembered for two films in particular. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus, and you're looking at these two films, and thematically, yeah, they're probably have parallels as you dig into them, but like you're thinking about one of them's about a psychiatric ward and
Hmm.
a rebellious man inside a psychiatric ward, and then the other one's about, well, is it really about Mozart? But like this crazed, obsessed man telling a story about how he killed Mozart. It's like
Hmm.
one of them is set inside this psychiatric ward, and one's set in the height of this classical music
Hmm.
in Europe. And it's just, if you take a step back and really think about it, it's like, do these two seem like they come from the same person? But the thing is, like, he's able to do a lot, and he directed the musical Hair.
Yes.
He directed Man on the Moon, which I'm pretty sure the only three films of his that I have actually seen are One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Amadeus, and Man on the Moon.
Hmm.
But obviously, they all have like that strong character study, those three films at the center, because they're very specific, powerful characters. And also, in a way, the two most famous ones of his, you kind of see those people from somebody else's perspective,
Hmm.
or at least like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the book 100% is supposed to be presented in that way. Because, I don't know, have you ever read the book?
No, no, but I know it's, obviously it's based on a book. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
know I have not read it yet.
Because the book is from Chief's perspective.
Hmm.
Like the whole entire thing, you're like in his head. And you're seeing McMurphy from his perspective, which
Hmm.
obviously they don't go that route with the film, and it's a lot more like focus on Jack Nicholson, but you do see it from like this silent man watching this like rebellious figure. But it's just impressive to see how much range he had in terms of the films that he made.
Yeah, and I feel like the reason One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest resonates because again, there is a documentary made with him about his life, where, for example, Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones appear
Mhm.
because Michael Douglas actually won an Oscar for that movie because he was a producer.
Yeah.
They actually were in talks. If I remember correctly, Michael Douglas was supposed to act in it, but Milos convinced him not to do that because he really wanted Jack Nicholson. I might be misremembering it because it's been a while since I've seen a documentary, but he talks
I
about it.
don't want to see that version of One Flew Over the
No,
Cuckoo. No offense to Michael Douglas. I don't want to see anybody but Jack Nicholson do that.
yes,
So
exactly. No, but and he's talking about on that documentary about the fact that he effectively took the upbringing and the communism into that movie, meaning they are rebellious against this oppressive system. They are, Jack Nicholson's characters are rebellious against this oppressive system, obviously in that movie being the nurse, and all the, the hospital, the mental hospital they are imprisoned in effectively.
mm,
So he really didn't view it as a simple story of patients and, being trapped in a mental hospital. He kind of had this parallel and he's explaining it why it meant so much to him, and I think that's why the movie to this day, stands the test of time
yeah.
because it's really impactful.
Well, and that makes a whole lot of sense because obviously, like Ken Casey's book was like height of like the 1960s, like that
Mm-hmm.
rebellious time in American culture with like the counterculture and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing it from Foreman's perspective, that makes a whole lot of sense on how
Mm-hmm.
he connected with it and made it his own, because it's like he had to live through a system like
Mm-hmm.
that and experience that kind of oppressive environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could even feel little threads of that. Like Mozart was a rebel, and like Salieri's the one who was like living in the system, benefiting from the system, and doing things traditionally. And Mozart is this rebellious entity, honestly. I'm remiss to just call him an individual, because like boy was he an energy in that movie. Like
Yep.
every time he just showed up, he just messed stuff up for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that kind of force. And Holtz's performance and Nicholson's performances are just these powerful, just huge energy just breaking the system that's all set up around them. So that's
Hmm.
it's a very interesting thing, and like being able to draw upon his own experiences and inject them into very different films and different stories, but still hitting in a way. And I'm gonna segue that into my last point is like he was such an impactful director. Because there's directors out there, it's like you watch their films and it's like that was a fun ride.
Hmm.
Or like, my God, that was so technically precise, but like, did I feel anything?
Hmm.
I feel deeply watching his films. There's just so much impact.
Hmm.
And like I was telling you, Luke, before we started recording, like one of the most visceral reactions I have watching any movie is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Hmm.
Because every time I watch it, doesn't even matter how many times I've watched it, I just get so invested in this film and so drawn in and get so angry.
Hmm.
Like, I just imagine like that moment with him and Nurse Ratchet towards the end of the film. I'm like, I want to be those hands on her because like what a horrible, abusive human being she is,
Yep.
and you just like want to snap along with McMurphy, and you know even Amadeus, it's like just watching that for 2 hours and 40 minutes, there's just so much emotion.
Hmm.
And them writing the Requiem at the end has to be like one of the most emotionally exhausting experiences watching a film because there's just so much energy
Yes.
between the two of them. And it's such a beautiful scene. And that's the thing, it balances so much beauty and also so much like impactful emotion into a film.
Hmm.
And there's not a lot of directors that can do that so impressively, and he did it twice, and that's really impressive.
Exactly. And I would strongly recommend People versus Larry Flint as well. If you haven't seen it yet, it's, Woody Harrelson as, as obviously the guy behind Hustler and his story. And it doesn't reach the, highs of those two movies we just mentioned, but it's still
Mhm.
a fascinating biopic done almost in unconventional way because yeah he displays him as a person rather than just this kind of figure that again as you say in hands of a different director Jack Nicholson could be over the top or that material could be over the top easily but in his way I feel like that movie was it's been ignored for a while. The same with The Man on the Moon. This was 1999. This was one of the first movies where Jim Carrey took a big chance and made a
Yeah.
leap into being a dramatic actor. Because if you think about it, before that, now we obviously know Jim Carrey, really, Eternal Sunshine and all those great movies. He has dramatic chops. But
Yeah.
before 1999, we've known him as Ace Ventura. We know him as
Yeah.
the guy, as the goofy guy from The Mask or Dumb and Dumber. So,
Who
and
talks with his butt cheeks.
yes, yes. So
So,
so this and Truman Show were his first two like okay I am more than just a goofy comedy guy. I want to do something more dramatic and the fact that he portrays this larger than life character of Andy Kaufman it's and his style of awkward humor. That's another point I would like to bring up, Ashley. Just a quick point.
mhm.
He was ahead of his time. There's this movie called Black Peter from the 60s. And I hope at some point, maybe they've already done it. I'm not up on my Criterion releases, but I would
Mhm.
hope somebody like Criterion would take that movie and restore it and releases it with English subtitles because such a awkward, funny, like awkward movie, kind of like an Office. Kind of like that kind of style of comedy where I think it would resonate very well with people today. And I think it just shows you how ahead of its time he was. That when he watched that movie from 60 something, it's really this guy just trying to date and trying to live his life, but very awkward fashion. So it is, I feel like now it would be appreciated much more, but it's a random movie from Czechoslovakia back from 63, I believe, 64. So I honestly hope somebody would take it, restore it, possibly in a to like Blu-ray 4K quality with nice English subtitles, like well translated, and so it would get some sort of recognition as well.
Absolutely. And we love being able to put a spotlight onto films like that not a lot of people have seen. And I feel like even admittedly myself, I've seen the greatest hits. I've
Mhm.
seen his biggest films, but like there's so much more to explore with Foreman. And hopefully this episode of All Time Greats puts a spotlight there. And because like to be honest, it's like some of the other directors I've spotlighted, it's like, sure, it's awesome to go and check out all of Scorsese's films so you don't
Mhm.
just sit there thinking that he's a great gangster movie director. But like, I don't think Scorsese and Spielberg need a whole lot of help getting
Mhm.
recognition as one of the all-time great directors. But hey, if you haven't checked out all of Foreman's films, hopefully this is a good opportunity that you do so. And Luke, thank you so much for coming on and especially bringing that perspective of his backstory and also shedding a light on some of his lesser known works.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.